Well, as promised in yesterday's video covering War of the Rohirrim's new images, we are back to take a look at the big Empire magazine feature of The Rings of Power Season 2. We'll go through the images, do some speculation and analysis, look at some key quotes in the articles, and I'll give you some of my thoughts throughout, what I think looks promising and what could be points of concern. First up, we have what was immediately my favorite of the Empire covers, which was the concept art of the Barrow-wights. Inside the issue, we get a couple more images as well as some concept art and behind-the-scenes glimpses at the prosthetics. Personally, I think the Barrow-wights look pretty legit in live action, particularly the image of Galadriel attempting to stab one. The glowing eyes look great and the way they float is creepy just as I'd expect. In the article, VFX supervisor Jason Smith says, "It was super exciting to take on something I hadn't seen before. We've seen undead before, but not like this. We're doing a little horror movie in Middle-earth." He goes on to say of the Barrow-wights, "It's a menace that is just going to encroach an inch at a time until you have nowhere to go and you die." It's funny because I think a lot of times folks just associate Tolkien with the Shire and Rivendell and all the beautiful places he comes up with, but he's also incredible at giving us slices of horror with things like the Dead Marshes, Shelob's Lair, Mordor, and of course, the Barrow-wights. Now there are a few things that give me some pause when it comes to these Barrow-wights, or rather their inclusion here. In the article, Smith also states, the Barrow-wights are ancient, reanimated heroes acting for evil against their will. Now first, there's the obvious issue that Barrow-wights are a distinctly Third Age thing. They specifically come about in the waning days of Arnor and are located at the Barrow Downs, not far from the Old Forest in Bree. They're also created by the Witch King, who obviously is not a player in this show yet. Now, having wights of some kind in the show isn't necessarily a deal breaker in my mind. I think it's pretty reasonable to think Sauron would be perfectly capable of doing evil things that his chief servant would later do. It is notable, however, that the wights are specifically created by evil spirits inhabiting the bones of dead Arnorians, which would seem to run contrary to what we're seeing in this article about these people serving evil against their will. Were this the case, I think it would be giving Sauron more power over the spirits, or Fea, of these characters than he actually should. Maybe that will seem like nitpicking to some, but it's a pretty easy thing to get correct, and a change to this concept would seem pretty unnecessary. Now, I have to say, it's worth taking the words of the VFX supervisor with a grain of salt when deep diving into the lore. For all we know, he could just be conveying the frame of reference for the design, and not the actual story that is playing out on screen. In all likelihood, we'll see these wights and won't have much background info about them. But speaking of background info, I think I've figured out where these wights might be located and from, and therefore where Galadriel and company will run into them. As we can see, especially in the behind-the-scenes images, the attire of the wights seems very Middle Eastern inspired. And while there's been a lot of talk about seeing Rhûn this season, I think these wights could be from Harad. Now, perhaps I'm reading the influence of the design wrong, and these could be more Eastern and therefore Rhûn. Those are really the only two options that would make any sense to me. There's no real Mannish kingdoms in Eriador during this time for these kings and queens to come from, and combined with the influence of the design, I've got to think that Harad or possibly Rhûn are the only places that make sense. Next up, we've got some new glimpses of the big bad, the Lord of the Rings himself. Now, without retreading too much of my review from last season, I was not a fan of how Sauron was handled in Season 1. Seeing him in a more sympathetic and repentant light wasn't something I was keen on, and nothing the show did proved to me it was worth the choice. While he may be revealed to have been pulling the strings all along, I think there were too many instances of his internal conflict playing out for that to both be the case and make sense from a filmmaking standpoint. That being said, I would emphatically welcome a Sauron more in line with canon who is pulling all the strings. We are finally getting Annatar working with Celebrimbor to forge Rings of Power. We get a couple images showing such. The first here is the two face-to-face. This pairs with an image of Annatar backlit by Celebrimbor's forge, presumably the moment he reveals himself to Celebrimbor, posing as the Lord of Gifts. And in the article, we kind of get the sense that actor Charlie Vickers may also be looking forward to having Halbrand in the rear view, and getting into Sauron and his Annatar guys. I was so excited to get to this point of the story because this is the canon of this time period, he says. You have Sauron and Celebrimbor working together, making rings. Going further about Sauron's fair form, he says, this is the best way to get him to do what he wants him to do. Make a bunch of rings that'll dominate everyone else. As someone who felt the forging of the 3 rings last season ended the season on much more of a whimper than the bang it should have been, I'm hoping Season 2 can do some damage control and give us a taste of the canon story that we all know so well. Vickers even alludes to the canon elements coming this season and beyond in this article. There are so many things that are coming canonically, says Vickers. You have the downfall of Numenor, you have the battle of the last alliance of elves and men. All that, as someone who loves these chapters in the Silmarillion, I can't wait to see on screen. Still, with the changes made to the story in Season 1, questions remain. Why do the elves need more Rings of Power if the 3, which are the culmination of their craft in the books, already accomplished their goal of saving their lives? If the 3 rings are the greatest of the 19, are they going to intentionally make less powerful rings? Or will they struggle to replicate what came before and not achieve it? Will Galadriel have told Celebrimbor that they had worked with Sauron? If not, what the crap? If so, why is a wardrobe and wig change enough for Celebrimbor to overlook him being the Dark Lord? Now, I honestly can't get too worked up about the last point. At the end of the day, I thought Charlie Vickers acting as Sauron after his reveal was some of the best of the show. I'm definitely looking forward to seeing him in full-on conniving manipulator mode now that the whole Halbrand Sauron mystery box is over with. The article goes on to talk about Celebrimbor, with showrunner Patrick McKay saying his relationship with Anatar is truly the spine of this season. I've got to say, I think Celebrimbor taking a front seat in this season is not only a good call, but it's an absolute necessity. We saw far too little of the great Elven Smith in Season 1, and if the ending to his arc is going to have any emotional weight, we need to see a lot more of him and what makes him tick before then. While the casting felt odd for me initially, Charles Edwards has won me over in the role. While I don't see him as a Feanor 2.0 design-wise like the Shadow of Mordor rendition, Edwards has already shown glimpses of just being a flat-out good actor, subtly conveying that there's levels to his character even in his smaller screen time. Celebrimbor is a character I felt we needed significantly more time with in Season 1, and the creation of the 3 rings didn't really feel as significant to the character as it should have. And while the ship has sailed to properly adapt that element of the story, there are some great dramatic beats that remain to be seen. The deception of Anatar, his discovery of Sauron's identity, and the final stand for him and his realm. It should make for some incredible drama if it's done properly. Next up, we have a single image from the Numenor side of the show, where we have Elendil and Miriel standing over the tomb of Miriel's father, Tar Palantir. We see the tomb has a lot of ornate design, including the Numenorian sun icon on the lower parts. Perhaps this woman on the corners is the Maya Uinen. She was of particular importance to the Numenorians and brought calmness to the sea. We also saw her statue in the jail area of Season 1. We also see it looks like seashells have been placed all around the king's tomb, which honestly just kind of makes me think of my kids picking up like 1,000,000 shells when we go on a trip to the beach and then handing them all to me. Now, as Season 1 ended, Elendil and Miriel came home to discover the king had died while they were gone, and so we are seeing the aftermath of that here. Miriel, of course, was blinded in the late part of Season 1. An original story choice that I thought was pretty inspired and instantly brought a lot of potential drama and conflict to her arc. As I said in my review, I think Numenor might just be the most well set up for Season 2 and have the best potential of the upcoming arcs. Their big 3 characters of Elendil, Miriel, and Pharazôn have all been really solid in their roles thus far, and they're all ones who I'm looking forward to seeing more of. Next up, we have an image of Elrond in the midst of battle. We saw a few glimpses of this in the initial teaser, but here we have a still where we can get a good look at his armor. I gotta say, I think the change from straight blades that we saw characters like Galadriel wielding in Season 1 to these curved blades was a good call. Utilizing curved blades for elves I think just helps reinforce the fluidity of their fighting style and works really well for the race design-wise. Overall, I think Elrond's armor looks really sharp here. It looks intricate, has some cool detail to it, and as we look closer, we see there appears to be a tree design across the breastplate, and there's also a heraldic device near the neck. Now, I've seen a lot of folks comparing this to the symbol of Gil-galad, and I definitely see a resemblance. However, that heraldry was illustrated by Tolkien himself and not in the pages of The Lord of the Rings, so they likely don't have the rights to use the exact symbol. However, it does look very similar, so it's likely an inspired by homage. I gotta say, I'm really looking forward to seeing Elrond commanding forces in the Siege of Eregion. His riding from Lindon to help in the war against Sauron and the way things play out could make for some great storytelling. Elrond, along with Durin, were my personal favorite characters in the show, and I thought the Khazad-dûm storyline was the strongest of the series. Personally, I didn't mind in the slightest seeing the kinda summer side of Elrond in Season 1. Now it's time to see him strong as a warrior and venerable as a king of dwarves. Really, my only critique of this image is the helmet looks like it might be too big. Like, I could see it being off by a size or two or something. Also, the top piece looks maybe a bit too American Chopper for my personal taste. There were also quotes in the article about how huge the Siege of Eregion will be, with the showrunner saying it will be days, weeks, and months of battle playing out over multiple episodes. I'm curious to see how this will play out, how they manage to have the battle ebb and flow over multiple episodes without becoming stale, not to mention how other storylines are presumably cut between these big chunks of battle. Another thing I've noticed when hearing about Season 2 is that dark and violent have been key words that have popped up multiple times. Knowing what we do about the story in the books, it's pretty easy to see how this will justify being darker and more violent. The real test, I think, will be how they manage to go darker and more violent without glorifying either. There's a big difference between Tolkien's Middle-earth and something like Game of Thrones. Both can be very dark and violent at times. But I think a huge difference is the glorification found in one is notably absent in the other. We'll see how this plays out in the execution, but I'm certainly hoping the show doesn't devolve into going for shock factor. We also got a pair of cover images for Galadriel, along with some new tidbits about the character in this feature. This was another element of the show that I thought really didn't live up to the potential of the character we know from the books. She certainly showed her capability on the battlefield, but was severely lacking in not just wisdom, but arguably common sense at times. When it comes to Galadriel, there's a quote that gives some hope that we might see her start to realign more with what fans were likely expecting, starting with owning her mistakes. "She really messed up so badly," said actress Morveth Clark. "There's a desperation to redeem herself, and through redeeming herself, protect Middle-earth, which is in more danger than it ever has been." As I said in my Season 1 review, the way Season 2 handles Galadriel is going to be really important for both the character and the season. Hearing that they're aware she's messed up in some of her choices is good to hear, but the question is how this will play out. Like I mentioned earlier, if she doesn't tell Celebrimbor that Halbrand was Sauron, it seems like anything that follows will be purely her fault, which would just be a lot to ask of an audience that is meant to see Galadriel as a hero. We haven't really gotten a full sense of what Galadriel is up to in Season 2 though. She's mentioned as being revved up because she's come face to face with the enemy, but we've only really seen her riding a horse and coming face to face with Barrow-wights. I'm curious to see what else is on the horizon for her character and what other characters she may encounter, and where. Either way, I'm glad to see the show realizes there's a need for this character to redeem herself, and I hope we're seeing a realignment for the character. We get a separate view in the Empire issue with Morveth Clark and Charlie Vickers, and aside from the usual images that look like they're for perfume ads or something, we do get some glimpses at the characters in the show. We see Galadriel looking at some documents in a room with a large map of Middle-earth in the background. This looks to be Lindon, or possibly Eregion. It's definitely an elvish location based on the design of the lamp in the background. As for the map itself, we see the iconic Middle-earth coastline, but the coolest part here is the corner image of Eärendil in his ship Vingilot. And he's holding a star. This of course representing the Silmaril which he wears upon his brow. It's always nice to see references to this great Silmarillion character who plays a huge role in the First Age and is the father of Elrond and Elros. In the same section of the magazine, we see an image of Sauron in what could be the Southlands. Some have theorized this could be him prior to meeting Galadriel on the raft in the sea. This particular article has a range of topics, but nothing really earth-shattering for Season 2, but there's some great moments with the people behind the characters. They talk about some behind-the-scenes things, Lego Barrow-wights, and how Morvith would basically freak out if she ever met Cate Blanchett, which I'm sure we can relate to. Definitely worth a read if you're interested. I had the pleasure of meeting both actors at Comic-Con a couple years ago, and they both seem like nice folks. Charlie dove deep into the appendices and Tolkien's letters after finding out he was Sauron, and Morvith's story about her dad being most excited she was on the cover of a book remains one of the most wholesome stories to me about the show. Next up, we've got a glimpse of a hill troll who appears to be enlisting alongside the forces of evil for Season 2. The caption in the article calls him an eater of dragon bones, and here we find him face to face with Adar. Design-wise, I think he looks good. Looks like how I'd expect a troll to look. He's got some lovely skulls on his loincloth, some weird piercing thing in his nipple for some reason, and I'm sure he'll crush some people or something in the battle to come. We see in the image here that the orcs are also continuing to use Sauron's symbol on the flags, which was revealed, and for what it's worth correctly predicted by me ahead of time, to be a rudimentary map of Mordor. We also find in the article that the troll is named Damrod, which is the only thing I found to be odd about him. Granted, we only have 3 named trolls in Middle-earth, William, Tom, and Bert in The Hobbit, so it's not a ton to go off of. Still, naming a troll after one of Faramir's Gondorian rangers seems like an odd choice. I think I might just call this guy Bob instead. Yep, I'm going with Bob. The only guess I've got here for the naming would be if Adar himself is the one giving him this name. As we've seen, Adar does retain a bit of his elvenness despite considering himself an Uruk. Perhaps it's he who gives this elvish in origin name to the troll. Oh, one more note, the troll was announced to be voiced by Gil-galad actor Benjamin Walker. I was hoping we would see more of Walker in Season 2 than we saw in Season 1, but I gotta admit, I was hoping it would be as the High King. Like Celebrimbor and Elendil, he's a character that we simply need more time with before his later heroics, if they're to be as meaningful as they can be to the audience. Now, as for Adar, who Bob is chatting with here, there was an article a while back in Entertainment Weekly where they revealed some images of the character. Taking over the role in Season 2 is Sam Hazeldine, and so far, I think he looks good. Seems to match the character well enough from what we saw in Season 1, but the big question here is how the actor stacks up. Aside from Durin and Elrond, I think Adar is probably the 3rd most common answer I've heard for favorite character of Season 1. Hazeldine definitely has some work to fill Joseph Maule's shoes. In the article, we got a bit from Hazeldine about how rough black speech can be on your throat. The hardest thing was I had to go straight into speaking black speech on day 1, the actor says. It's hard on your throat and it's hard to remember because it doesn't really follow the Elvish languages, which have roots in real languages like Welsh and Finnish. But he, that being Tolkien, just didn't write that many words in black speech. But Hazeldine took the challenge as an opportunity and actually had the show's Tolkien lore experts rewrite some of his lines from English into black speech in order to give Adar the proper gravitas. And I gotta say, I think it's cool that he continued this commitment to black speech. It's been documented that his predecessor, Joseph Maule, and the other orc actors really fought for the inclusion of black speech during Season 1, so it's nice to see that being carried on. We get another image of Adar in the Empire issue, and I gotta say, it looks pretty BA. We've got Adar marching with orcs all around him. We can't know for sure, but I'm guessing this is them marching into the Battle of Eregion that will likely come late in the season. While the orcs here are blurry, I gotta say these particular ones look good and better than the one we saw in the Entertainment Weekly piece. I don't know what it is about this guy, he just looks kinda derpy to me. Thankfully, we also got a look at the dwarves in this issue, though there wasn't as much on them in the article as some of the other characters and races. Here we see Durin Disa wielding an axe and I think some kind of hammer. The showrunners talk about Khazad-dûm losing both the physical light that allows them to grow food and the spiritual light that keeps them in tune with the mountain. My best guess is this force causing them to lose light is either somehow Sauron himself, or some kind of emanating effect of the Balrog, who we've already seen awake in this series. This lack of light, so to speak, will be Sauron's in to Khazad-dûm, where he can offer up rings of power. We already saw Durin III in earlier images with one such ring, which will no doubt contribute to him wanting to delve deeper for more riches within the mountain, including Mithril. If I had to guess, I think this moment of Durin Disa holding up weapons could be them standing before Sauron himself rather than going into some larger battle. Perhaps they're ones who are hesitant about this Anatar guy when his father welcomes him in. There's a couple big question marks for me when it comes to this storyline. One is, I'm curious to see how many rings are given specifically to the Khazad-dûm dwarves. We know from both the books and the images for this season that Durin III gets one. Will all 7 be given to Khazad-dûm? If so, that feels like a huge concentration in one civilization of dwarves, and that we could be missing out on the possible inclusion of the dwarf clans of Rhûn. Are there even 7 characters within Khazad-dûm that could be considered lords to receive such rings? Another question is, would Elrond have had the chance to warn Durin about Anatar? This comes down to how much does Elrond know. He knows Halbrand wasn't who he said he was, but there's no indication that he would jump to him being Sauron. As I said earlier in regards to Galadriel, who knows what and when will make a big difference on how the dynamics play out here. And finally, I can't help but think that between the Balrog and the description of loss of light, that we're barreling toward the fall of Khazad-dûm. While I can see how it would work in the context of the larger show, it does feel like Season 2 would be insanely early for that to happen. And between this huge event, the Barrow-wights, and the potential inclusion of Gandalf, the previous words about having plenty in the Second Age that they don't need to pull things from the Third Age can really start to ring hollow. But perhaps that was something that changed course during production or was said to throw viewers off track. We can't really be sure, but I'm definitely curious to see how each of these things is presented and explained should they come to fruition. We also get a new image of the Stranger, who is wielding a staff, or maybe just a stick, while screaming. The article kind of rehashes what we saw in Season 1, which actually can be said for a lot throughout the article. There's probably as much summary of Season 1 as there is talking details of Season 2. It mentions the fact that the Stranger, who we now know to be a wizard, was part of the Sauron mystery box. Again, something I wasn't a big fan of. It felt like his story spun its wheels for at least a few episodes, like it was just waiting for the Sauron reveal to come so that the plot could move forward. That being said, I did think Waymond's performance was really solid, especially since he was nearly non-verbal for most of the time. The article itself speculates whether this could indeed be Gandalf, and I'm still maintaining my stance that he could and should be a blue wizard. It would make the most sense and be something the show could forge ahead on its own path. Now, since we're catching up on some of the smaller articles over the previous months, I wanted to real quick cover some images from IGN that focus on Arondir, Isildur, and new character Estrid. In case there was any doubt in your mind, no, the ancestor of Aragorn, who has no wife or kids as of yet, did not die in Season 1 of the show. We see Isildur will meet up with Arondir, and it looks like Arondir will pull Isildur out of a swamp of sadness sometime on their adventures together. Along the way, they'll pick up a mysterious woman named Estrid, who we see in a couple of images here. We see in one image that Isildur may be going in for a smoochy kiss, and in the article we find that Isildur immediately trusts Estrid. Arondir, on the other hand, thinks she's hiding something. Pretty standard stuff that has people making all kinds of guesses as to who this character could be. The most obvious theory is that this will be Isildur's future wife, which would make sense. After all, Isildur should presumably have some heirs prior to the War of the Last Alliance that is likely to take place in a few seasons, so things would need to proceed in that direction. However, the line about Arondir not trusting this character has given rise to some other theories. Some saying that this is actually Sauron in disguise, which I don't think is the case. I'm really hoping that our days of the Sauron mystery box are behind us. Another pretty out there theory is that she's actually Shelob in human form, which, I honestly think that would be kind of hilarious, considering the Shadow of Mordor games already did this, and it's easily the most referenced thing when the lore of those games gets made fun of. So we'll see how this shakes out. My money is this being a bit of a bait and switch, where we're made to think she's something evil but turns out she's not, and they get married and have little baby Elendor, Aratan, Kirion, and Valandil. Yeah, Isildur's kind of behind schedule in the offspring department. And as we saw in the teaser, we can of course expect some awesome acrobatics from Arondir, which I'm totally in favor of. He definitely had some of the best action bits in Season 1. And the final picture we have from the Empire article is of Nori the Harfoot. But what do you all think of the new images and Empire magazine piece? How are you feeling going into Season 2? Let me know in the comments. I've long said that the big canon moments of the Second Age are going to be the measuring sticks for me when it comes to this show, and while the creation of the Three Rings was something that simply didn't measure up for me, Season 2 is set to have a lot more things that could come directly from Tolkien's pages. Time will tell how it goes. So there we have it, the latest look at the upcoming Rings of Power Season 2, which premieres August 29th, less than 2 months away now. The big question now is when we might get a second full trailer. It's possible that may come during San Diego Comic-Con, but I haven't seen anything announced about whether the show will be there like it was in 2022. I'll definitely be at Comic-Con again this year, so if there's anything in the way of news for Rings of Power or War of the Rohirrim, you can bet I'll be ready to jump on and bring you guys the news. Also, I'll have booth space this year with some Nerd of the Rings merch for sale and some pretty fun giveaways. So come say hi if you'll be there, and be sure to follow me on Instagram for info about the giveaways. As always, I want to say a huge thank you to all my Patreon and YouTube supporters who make this channel possible. Tom DeBombadil19, Lissamy the Cinda, Rabbi Rob Thomas, Charles Leisure, CCDC Red Team, Joe Tepper, The Mighty Mim, Andrew Carlisle, Swirled Traveler, Matthew Jeffrey, Viking Lord, Alvin Einbert, Jeremy Daniel Derby, Leo Vittori, Sky Carcass, Slide Belts, Dane Ragnarsson, Berto Berg, Graham Derricott, The Dark-Haired One, Wyland, Micah Wu, and Debbie. If you enjoyed the artwork in this video, check out the artists in the description to purchase prints of their great work for yourself. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time on Nerd of the Rings.